Hello and welcome to today's MoneyFit Live webinar, Young and Financially Empowered. We're talking today about some of the financial challenges very specific to the 20-something crowd. Some of these might be applicable to those in the 30s, 40s, and beyond, but those in the 20s are specifically dealing with some of these issues. And being relatively new to personal finance, whether you just graduated from college, or just starting a family, or you've been working for just a couple of years, these topics are pretty critical to understand for financial stability. So what we're going to be talking about today, we do have our MoneyFit Live every Thursday, 11:30 Mountain Time. That translates to 1:30 p.m. Eastern and 10:30 p.m. Pacific, as you can see, 10:30 a.m. Excuse me. So please join us every Thursday. I look forward to it. Let's go over some of the danger signs. How do you know you might be in trouble or heading toward trouble? Because you might just be on your way down the road and trouble finds you. You might not expect it. It can come out of nowhere. So these are just a few of the signs that you might want to look for. For example, are you able to pay if you have student loan debt, are you only able to pay or not able to pay your standard repayment amount? The 10-year default on student loans, the default repayment term is 10 years. If you're struggling to make that monthly payment, the standard default payment, there's some trouble, and that means you might need to find some extra income, you might need to find ways to cut some expenses, or both. Typically both. Or if you're looking for ways to extend that payment out into the future, 15, 20, 25 years, we'll talk about the dangers of that. Perhaps you have more than 15% of your budget, of your monthly gross income is going toward just car payment and car insurance. Typical household, that might involve more than $600, $700 for the average household in this country. It's going to be less than that for 20-something. But for most of us who have been in the 20s, one of the things we regret sometimes is having spent more money on cars and less money on other higher priorities. So be careful not to get in the trap of getting into a car loan early in your life, because then you're kind of stuck, and it can just turn into a terrible cycle. Perhaps you've gone over your limit on your credit card, or you've maxed out your credit card, or you're now late on credit card payments. Another sign that there's some dangerous issues approaching in your near future financially. Maybe you've had a debit card declined. You have no savings. You don't even have a checking account. Some of these are just some of the signs that there needs to be more attention paid to your personal finances. 20s is a fun, wonderful, exciting time of your life. Whether you're still in school or just out of college, working on your first big job, you're adulting now, it is an exciting time. You may be living close to home. You may be moving away from home. The last thing you want to do is complicate all that fun and that excitement with the mundane issues of personal finance. But I'll promise you that if you will control your personal finances, you take control of them, you'll never regret it. Otherwise, you'll end up doing what a lot of us did when we were young, is we let our money start controlling us. We get into too much debt, and then we lose control over what we can and cannot do, because debtors are following us and keeping us from doing some of the things that we want to do. Let's talk about some of these debts. Specifically, let's talk about debts. There is the old adage that there is good debt and bad debt, or I don't know if an adage, but an old dichotomy of that there's good debt and bad debt. I don't like that dichotomy. I prefer potentially good debt, practical debt, or bad debt. We'll just talk mostly about potentially good debt and bad debt today. If you just say it's good debt or bad debt, it makes it really easy to get into debts that are potentially good, but could end up putting you in a terrible spot. And let's go over some of those. But here's the thing. if you've got these danger signs in your life and you're not paying attention, your whole house of cards or your whole, the dominoes may start to fall pretty quick. And when they fall, they can fall in a hurry and fall completely. So you want to make sure that you are ready, that you have all your skills and positive financial habits in place so that you are in control and you know where you're going financially. Let's talk about this first debt. Big deal for a lot of 20-somethings. There's the talk that millennials are not able to afford home loans. It's just impossible with the price of homes. There are some markets where it does not even millennials. You can talk about any generation is having a hard time affording new homes, their own homes in some markets around here on the coasts and even some of the big growing cities inland. It's not just a millennial thing. Yes, millennials can have a lot of student loan debt. That shouldn't keep you from considering buying a home. Now, if you got into so much student loan debt that you can't afford a home, just focus on getting out of the student loan debt. You don't have to wait 10 years to pay it off. The sooner you pay off your student loan debt, or down even, it doesn't have to be completely paid off. You can still buy a home with student loan debt. But the sooner you pay it down, the faster you'll be able to qualify for a home loan. Home loans are potentially beneficial. Back in the 2000s, everybody was thinking, everybody was saying good home loans are good. That's good debt. And so as prices were going up, everybody was just throwing their everything they could into a new home. Let's buy a new home, bigger home, more homes. And when the prices are going up 50% or 75% a year, in some places, that seems, this is awesome. They can turn around and sell it. But pretty soon, prices started to plummet again. And those who were still left holding a home that they couldn't afford were in a world of hurt. So mortgages are potentially beneficial. Generally, they are. Over time, not in a short term, as we saw in that short term, in a 2-3 year period, prices skyrocketed, and then they plummeted in another 2 or 3 year term, and then they've pretty much rebounded and on average, about pretty close to they increase in value pretty close to the same as you would find for inflation, about 3 to 4% on average. More recently, since the Great Recession, more about 2% a year on average. That's still better than renting generally. If you think about it, after 30 years, if you're on a 30-year fixed mortgage versus rent, you get into either rent or mortgage, and they're about 30% of your income. That's pretty common. Every year, your mortgage stays the same. Generally, income's going up, rent's going up and up. So by the end of 30 years, your rent is still 30% of your income, but your mortgage, if you had gotten a mortgage, it would only be about 12%, 15%, 10% of your total monthly income. So over time, a mortgage really is a much better opportunity financially. But you have to be careful because it's only potentially beneficial. How about a car loan? When I go into high schools, I say, and we talk about good debt, bad debt. Car loan. They assume that because it's a big loan, it must be a good debt. Or because they get something and it's something you can handle, you can hold, you can touch, it must be good debt. Wrong. Just because it's big and expensive does not make it good debt or even potentially good debt. Every car loan is a bad financial move. Sorry, I'm going to shake the whole building because that's what I believe. Every time you buy a car, it's going to go down in value. No cars go up in value. Okay, all right, right? There's the collector cars, right? You have to, one, be lucky that you find one, and two, you have to put a boatload of money into that car to make it valuable again. It is not something you just buy a car, drive it around like you would any other car, and then luckily, look, it's gone up in value. It doesn't happen. So look at your car loan as a terrible investment. It's not an investment. That's why. Do what you can to minimize car loans. If you get into a car loan when you're in your 20s, you will get into a car loan in your 30s, in your 40s, in your 50s. You'll be in a retirement age and you'll still be borrowing money to buy a car. Do not accept that it's normal. Say, I'm not going to borrow money to buy a car. I'm just going to start smaller. I'm going to start with a car I can afford to buy cash. Or if you do absolutely have to borrow money, borrow one for the beater, for what my generation used to call beaters, that you can drive around. It'll get you from point A to point B. And after 4 or 5 years, you've been saving up money for your next car, and then you can get a little nicer car in cash. And then you keep saving, because cars die. They last on average about 10 to 15 years. If you buy them fairly new, I wouldn't buy them brand new, but a year or 2 or 3 old, hang on to them for 10, 15 years, you generally are fine. But in the meantime, you're saving up money for your next car. How about student loans? Potentially beneficial? Yes. Generally, there are many circumstances, though, that it is a terrible idea. In general, getting a degree from a private or a public 4-year university, whether it's a state college, a state university, whether it's a private nonprofit college that's sponsored by a church or religion, or like some of the big ones in the Ivy League, a 4-year degree from any college or university is generally going to more than almost double your lifetime earnings. That, for the cost of your income, of your degree, is an outstanding investment opportunity. Here's the problem. Most people who are having trouble with their student loans are not going and getting a 4-year degree. Those who get that 4-year degree are generally doing fine. There are some exceptions. The ones that are having the trouble are the ones taking out a ton of student loans to go to a 2-year or 1-year certificate program or associate's degree from a for-profit university. Those are the ones that if you come out with $30,000 of student loan debt, that 2-year degree is not going to increase your lifetime earnings significantly enough to overcome the amount of debt that you just got yourself into. Here's the rule of thumb. Don't get more debt by the time of graduation than you realistically will be able to earn your first year out of college with a degree from your school. And don't believe your school. Just because your school recruiters say this is what you can earn out of college, great. Do some more research. Head to a local library. Great resource to get some good information, real statistics on what you can expect to earn right out of college with a degree from that school. Because there are many of those for-profit schools that actually have no added benefit to a certificate or to that you could probably find a job just as paying just as much or more without it sometimes. Okay, how about credit card debt? Obviously, credit card debt we consider bad debt. If you have to carry a balance, if you do carry a balance, you don't ever have to. But if you end up carrying a balance, you're paying interest on it. So whatever you purchased now with a credit card, you're now paying more for because you're having to pay interest at 10, 15, 20% annual interest. Business loan, potentially very beneficial, but also very high risk. If you do consider a business loan, understand this. It is could be one of the most rewarding opportunities financially of your life. But it is also one of the highest risk decisions you'll ever make. As a young person, you are in a situation where you are risking the least to start a business. Do it. If you have an idea, go for it. Try it. Come up with a great plan, though. Know exactly what you're getting into ahead of time, because a large percentage of businesses fail. But generally, when you're in your 20s, you have either no one depending upon you for your income already. So if things go poorly, you can just start pretty fresh. You might be behind a year or two, but you can more than make that up with a successful business. So I encourage you to do it. Go into a business if you want to. If you have any desire to do that, just know that if you take out a loan to start that business, it's almost always a personal loan. You are guaranteeing that loan. If the business fails, you can't just say, "Oh well, there's no business for you to take, Mr. or Mrs. Bank lender." They come to you and say, "You are the guarantor of that loan. The business failed. You now have to pay that." So just beware that that's generally how that works. All other loans, if you're paying interest, you are going to end up I'm going to consider that bad debt because you're now increasing the expense or the cost of whatever it is you spent, purchased originally, whether it was a product or a service or an activity. Okay, let's talk about some of the possible negative outcomes of defaulting on your debts, having things turn south when it comes to your debts. Which of all these things might happen if you don't make your payments? Now, these absolutely are possible things that might happen. Some of them are guaranteed to happen. If you can't make your payment, if you stop making payments on your debts, you might lose your home. If you stop making payment on a home that you just bought after 3 or 4 or 5 months, and you're not working with the lender to reorganize your debt, they are going to start foreclosure proceedings probably. Same thing with a vehicle. You can't, in many states, it's not a month or two. In many states, they have the right to repossess your vehicle the day after the payment was due. Most won't do that because they're not in the business of repossessing vehicles. They're in the business of selling them, and they don't want to incur all those extra expenses, which is also why they pass all those extra expenses on to you. If you get your vehicle repossessed, even if you voluntarily surrender it at the lender, you're still going to end up, let's say you owe $5,000 on a car, or let's start with $10,000, and you can't make the payment. You surrender it. They're going to turn around and sell that car that's probably only worth about $7,000 or $8,000 anyway. Otherwise, you would have sold it for what it was, what you could, and pay it off. But they're going to take that car that's probably only worth $7,000 or $8,000, and they're going to sell it at auction for about $3,000. You owe $10,000. It was worth $7,000 if you had been able to sell it outright, but you surrendered it. Now they only sold it at auction for $3,000. Guess what? You now owe that difference of about $7,000, and they will come back to you and put that on your credit report if you don't pay it. It will. They may even take you to court, garnish your wages, and have you pay for a car that you don't even have anymore for the next 2, 3, 4 years. Absolutely a possibility. Avoid that at all costs. There are programs out there, government programs, and lots of nonprofit housing counselors out there that will help you if you are in trouble with your house. Guess what? If you get in trouble because you got into a car that you can't afford, you know how many programs are out there, how many nonprofits exist out there to help you figure that out? Big fat goose eggs. Nobody is going to help you figure out how to get out of a car you can't afford. So don't get into a car you can't afford. I'm sorry if I sound like a parent. I've got my own kids, and I have seen with family and friends and those that we work with the frustration of getting into a car that you can't afford and something happens to it, and there's really no help out there. It's hard to figure out how to deal with that other than just paying it off and getting out of it. You might not be able to get a cell phone plan again if you stop making your payments. If you stop making payments to your utilities, eventually they will cut that off, and you may not be able to get another account in your name until you get caught back up on all those payments. Even if you do, they are going to probably require a very high deposit, a security deposit. Same thing with an apartment. You may not be able to get into an apartment, or if you do, they might really charge you a high security deposit. All your accounts, if you're late on payments or missed payments, you're now going to be charged higher interest rates typically because you are higher risk. If you're not making payments, you're higher risk to missing payments in the future. That's what credit is. They look at your past behavior and they compare it to you, and they try and predict future behavior. That's the best predictor of future behavior. If you're missing payments now, you're likely to miss payments in the future. And so that's not a lot of people see that. That's not fair that they're punishing me. It's not a punishment. That's reality. If you're high risk, you should not be taking out. They're not giving you a loan because they're a charity. They're giving you a loan to make money. And if you're high risk, it's natural them to get as much reward as they can, to get as much of their money back. And so that's why they're going to charge higher interest rates. So these are some of the more common ones that can happen. Divorce is very common. It's arguing about money and debt is number one reason couples argue. These things can happen with this explanation. You're not going to get kicked out of college if you miss your credit card payment, or if your car gets repossessed. But if you take out a loan directly from your school, because there's different loans, type of student loans. There's student loans you can get from the Fed directly, government direct loans. You can get private student loans from local banks or national banks, and you can get loans sometimes directly from schools. If you get a loan from your school, if you have a loan from your school and you don't pay it back, and you want to go back and finish off a program, you have to get caught up on that loan before they will let you back in the program. Might you lose your job? Not if you miss a credit card payment, but indirectly, you're going to be stressed financially and poor, and it does lead to poor production on the job, and you might lose your job that way. Let me go back to that one. How about going to jail? Okay, there's that one down in the corner. You're not going to go to jail for missing a payment. Most states. Honestly, if you're in Texas or Florida or a handful of other states where you take out a rent-to-own contract and you don't pay that, and you don't return the couch or the refrigerator or the big screen TV on time, you can have a visit from the sheriff at your front door, and you could spend a night in jail or two. So there are some places where missing payments can actually, we do have debtors' prison still in some states in this country. We're trying to get rid of them. There are some cities that are are finally getting rid of some of their outdated and poorly constructed laws that have to do with things like that. Your TV, though, it's safe. If you buy a big screen TV, gigantic big screen TV with a credit card, and you don't pay that off, or you miss the payment, you get to keep the TV. Yay! Does that sound like a great deal? Understand this, though. You just shot your credit rating, and so any loan you get in the future, if you ever do get a loan for the next 7 years to 10 years, is going to be much more expensive. Okay, so don't think of that, obviously. Nobody's thinking that they're going to try and take advantage of that, but when that happens, they're not going to come in and take your TV. Be more, just do what you can to stay in touch with the creditors and work out a payment plan before it goes to collections, because once it goes to collections, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. You just have to pay it off or get into some pretty unpleasant negotiations. So what do you do when you do have a lot of debt? How do you get out of it? How do you deal with it? Okay, first things first. If you want to get out of debt, you got to stop the slide into further debt. You can't continue to use your credit card if you're wanting to get out of debt. Certainly not at the same levels. Now, there are a lot of people, and I remember being in this situation when I was in my 20s. My credit card was maxed out. All my money, I was sending pretty much my whole paycheck every month just to pay off my credit card bill, because I was using that to live on. I was buying groceries. I was paying pretty much everything. And so if I just said, well, I'm not going to use my credit card anymore, my next full paycheck would go to pay off my credit card. And then how do I pay my rent? How do I buy groceries and so forth? So you have to stop the slide, meaning either completely if you can, or at least start to cut back and start paying cash for a lot of your expenses. And what that means, you've got to have a plan. You've got to have, it's called a budget as well, but your spending plan. You got to know what you're spending on, how much you're spending, and start identifying your priorities. Do you really need to be paying for cable TV? Oh, but I can't do without watching my favorite football team on eight Saturdays a year. That's fine. Can you do without a car? Because if you can't afford to pay your car, but you are paying a subscription at $200 a month, there's priority issues there. Here's the reality in this country: 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. And almost 80% of Americans still pay for a cable or satellite television, which means we are as a society have decided that we're prioritizing our TV over saving for the future. Now, saving for the future can be emergencies, but it also can be a vacation and Christmas gifts, birthday gifts, and fixing your car, getting your next car. I just don't want. I have no patience for anybody who complains about not affording their bills when in their bills they've got all these things that are not priorities. There's other things. In fact, did you know for that same $200 a month for your special sports ticket or movie ticket on your cable bill, you could actually afford season tickets to a professional football or baseball team, or half of an NBA season for your favorite team. So it's just priorities. We just don't realize how much we spend over time. That this whole problem of subscriptions for the 20-something crowd right now, we just get a subscription for everything. For video games, you're playing games on your phone. Oh, if you subscribe to this for $10 a month, and then you can get unlimited extras, bonus features, whatever. And you just think it was $10. But $10 here, $20 there, $50 there can add up easily to $10,000 or more a year when you get 4 or 5 or 10 of those going without even thinking about it. And sometimes you have to modify your behaviors and your habits. You do not have enough money for everything you want in this world. It's not just because you're 20s. You're in your 20s. That's reality. Even Bill and Melinda Gates, richest, wealthiest people in the world, can't give money to everybody, every organization they think is valuable. Even their foundation, worth billions of dollars, has to prioritize their expenses. So if they do, I think we do as well. All right, so here are your options. When you get into debt, first thing everybody thinks of is, well, if I can't afford my payments, I'll just file for bankruptcy. When you're in your 20s, hopefully you're not there, but there are a lot of people in their 20s that are filing for bankruptcy. You don't just file for bankruptcy. It is not something you can take lightly. It's not easy. It's not painless. It hurts financially, emotionally, socially, professionally. It hurts. It's difficult to go through. I haven't met anybody who's gone through it lightly. And once you're in that situation and you give up some control of your life to the bankruptcy court, that is not a nice place, easy place to be. Avoid bankruptcy. Okay, let's talk about some expensive loans that you might be tempted to look at because they're convenient and easy. And when you're in your 20s, you might be looking for convenient and easy. We do that at every age. But avoid these kind of loans, okay? First of all, be careful not to overdraft. In fact, I recommend not having overdraft. I would much rather that you just have a payment declined or denied rather than getting hit with an overdraft fee, because it can easily work out to be 10% of your a 10% loan. In fact, some cases you might double or triple, quadruple the expense of your purchase because of an overdraft fee. So avoid overdrafting. It's not a good idea. Opt out of it. Don't ever opt in. It's required that you opt in. Don't opt in. And if you're in it already, I'd recommend typically considering opting out. Okay, credit card purchases, that's 14 to 17%. That's the average this century, pretty much. Your average credit card interest rate is 14 to 17%, which means if you're using your credit card and carrying a balance, everything you purchase, you are adding an additional 14 to 17% onto the purchase price. Not a great idea. If you're using that card to get a cash advance, it's even worse. You're going to be looking at 20 to 30% increase, because that's how much interest they start charging immediately. There is no grace period on cash advances. If you start talking about getting into going to a corner finance store, I call them the strip mall finance companies. These are not at banks and credit unions. These are not the traditional lenders. These are the ones that they have all the big banners in their windows saying, hey, $500, $1,000, $10,000 loan, we make it easy. Yeah, they make it easy to get into, but guess what they make it to get out? Difficult and expensive. 20 to 50%. 50%. That means that whatever you buy with that, you're going to end up paying another half again for whatever you just spent on it. Pawn loans. I love shopping at pawn stores. Use them to buy stuff there. But if you're going to use them for a loan, you're going to end up paying about 50 to 100% annual interest on anything you borrow. If you try and use a tax refund loan, that borrowing money at time of when you do your tax returns and the processor says, hey, you're going to get your tax refund, but if you want it today, it's only this much for the fee. that fee works out to be anywhere from 50 to 500% annual interest. So avoid that. Not a good idea. How about taking your car? You own your car outright. If you take your pink slip or your registration to an auto title or a car title loan, or they might call it car equity or auto equity, they will lend you a small portion of the value of that car. And if you don't pay it back in 30 days, they take it. You get to keep that 20% or whatever it is of the value of the car. Yay, but they have the rest of the car. They have the entire car, and they can do whatever they want with it. You're not getting it back without paying off the entire loan plus massive fees. How about these rent-to-own contracts I mentioned? They work out to doubling to quintupling the cost of whatever it is you're buying. So if you just have to have that big screen TV for the Super Bowl, well, guess what? You get into that contract, and if you don't live up to that contract, I mentioned you might have the sheriff opening up on your door, but by the time you pay that off, because they advertise, their advertised prices are weekly costs, not monthly like most people expect. If you don't pay that off every week, they come in and repossess it. If they can, they can. But if you pay that off, and after 2 years you've paid it off, you will have paid so much that if you had waited and saved up that same amount, you would have been able to buy 5 big screen TVs. That's one for every bedroom and bathroom in your house. Think about that. So it's not just more expensive, it's that you lost out on the opportunity to do something else with that money that you might have found more valuable to yourself. Avoid loans, payday loans. Those are going to be super expensive at 400 to over 800% on an annualized basis. Yeah, they're 2-week loans, and their fees are 15 to 25%. But if it's a 2-week loan, then you have to multiply whatever that percentage is by 26, because that's how many 2-week periods there are in a year. And that is what you want to compare to an interest rate that you see on a credit card. Very expensive. If you get one today, you'll likely have 8 loans by this payday loans by this time next year. Those are the statistics. All right, so consequences. Let's say you choose I'm going to ignore my debt. You're going to end up with fees. You might end up with lawsuits. You might end up having your wages garnished. If you pay as agreed, you'll be debt-free. It might take a while, but look at our opportunities on moneyfit.org. Look at our blog. Look at our resources there for how to pay do-it-yourself debt relief. You got some opportunities or tools there to get out of debt faster. You want to use a credit counseling, nonprofit credit counseling agency like MoneyFit. There's about 100 of us around the country, credit counseling agencies. You will be debt-free in 5 years or less. There's no prepayment penalty. There are some fees, but even with those capped and highly regulated fees, your monthly payment is typically much less because the creditors agree to lower your interest rates pretty significantly. You want to settle your debt for half of what you owe. These are the companies that are advertising late at night on TV and radio. You can get out of 50% of what you owe. Just know that if even in the small percentage of time, circumstances where they are successful, I've seen anywhere from 3% up to 12%, that on top of the 50% that you have to pay them another 25% of your original debt, and then you have to pay taxes, likely to pay taxes on top of that. It is not as rosy, absolutely not rosy like it's painted to be. There are some real drawbacks to debt settlement. Then there's bankruptcy, which we mentioned. It does ruin your credit for up to 10 years. It's expensive to file. Most bankruptcy attorneys in 2005, after the bankruptcy law changed a lot of things, were charging, before that they were charging anywhere from $800 to $1,500. By about 2010, it was about $1,200 to $2,000. You'll find it pretty difficult to come across an attorney that's charging much less than $1,500 anymore. All right, if you want to change, let's say you're like, I don't want to go down this road of financial problems and difficulties. Here's what you do. Picture your future. What do you want your financial future to look like? 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, 2 years down the road, doesn't matter. Picture your future and then compare it to today. How does it look? Do you see any difference? How does that make you feel? You feel uncomfortable, like, this is not happening. This is not the direction I'm going. That difference between where you want to be and where you are, that creates discontent. That creates motivation. So with that motivation, then you have to say, what am I doing to improve the chances of getting where I want to be? I'm going to tell myself, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to write it down and remind myself regularly. And then you're going to take one step today. Just one. I don't care if it's a small step. It can be, hey, I'm going to open up a checking account. I'm going to pay off this $30 loan at a clothing store. I'm going to make one phone call to a credit counseling agency. I'm just going to sit down and spend 40 minutes putting together a spending plan. Whatever it is, take one step today. If you don't do it right now, it's not going to happen, and you'll continue down the same path that you're on now, and it's not going to get you to that future you want. If you would like a certificate of achievement or certificate of completion for this course, particularly if you need it for continuing education, just go to bit.ly/MFL-20s. That is, MFL stands for Money Fit Live dash, you got to have the hyphen in there, 20S. It's going to ask you for a passcode, your name, email address, and passcode, because you need that to deliver the certificate. The passcode is 20-something. No spaces, no dashes, no capitals. Something is all lowercase. 20SOMETHING. If there's anything we can do for you, if you'd like more information on taking control of your finances, go to moneyfit.org. Check out our academy there. Lots of webinars and calculators and things, tools that can help you create the financial future that you want and deserve. Thank you guys for joining me today. I wish you all the best, and I hope you have an enjoyable afternoon.